Hi everyone, welcome. Happy Tuesday to Tuesday Talks with Ann. We'll give everybody a moment to come on and we will get started. We're waiting for our three guest speakers. Oh, there's Jessie. Let me see. Let's see here. Okay, let's see. Jessie, I just invited. This takes just a minute to invite people. Okay. Andy's on and Colleen's on. Deidre's on. Hi, Jessie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you this evening?
Good, thank you.
Good. Just waiting for Alicia and for Nicole to join in, and as soon as I see them, I will invite them.
Awesome. It's been a busy day.
Yeah, it's beautiful out, and I think that makes it harder to want to work.
Yeah.
I wanted to be I took my dog for a walk today at lunchtime, and it was so lovely.
I know, it feels good to have like the spring in the air.
See here. Just waiting for other two guests. I don't see them here quite yet.
Do you want me to text? I don't know how to do that. And
I know, because it's on your phone, right? Oh, hang on, there's Nicole. Oh, I think everybody's here. Hang on, let me just do the invites now. Here. There's Alicia. And there's Nicole. Okay, everybody should have the invites. Our special guest should be popping in. Hi there. Good to see you.
Hi, Alicia.
All right.
Comfy.
Okay. And I believe Nicole should be joining us as well.
This is my first group. Like, I've done Instagram lives with one person, but this is like group sex. I mean, it's a group experience.
Welcome to Last week was my first time with 4 people, and it was awesome.
All good.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just trying to get Nicole.
Oh, there's so many fun people joining. Thanks for joining us all. Yay.
All right, I just re-invited Nicole, so hopefully she will be able to pop on.
Great.
Oh, thank you for being a fan. As people pop on, tell us, what should we have people tell us? Tell us, what does mental health mean to you?
Awesome.
What does mental health mean? Like, what does that even mean? In this moment where we're all having such big feelings, I think for me in this moment, like, mental health means acknowledging that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah, I've been studying a little bit more about Stoicism, and they say like you really should feel all your emotions, so you should be okay with. You should cry, and crying isn't, I think we oftentimes say that crying is a sign of weakness, or, society puts all these different things. You shouldn't cry, but like, so good to feel and have emotions and emote, and then, recognize that, honor them.
I love that someone said, like, feeling the feels one moment at a time. And that's exactly what you just said. And a huge I've fallen in love with Stoicism through, oh my God, what's his name? Eric Barker. Do you know Eric Barker?
No, I don't.
His book came out today.
Oh.
And it's really good. And he's like my Stoic pal.
Awesome.
Yeah. I believe the book's title is Plays Well with Others.
Oh, okay. I've started recently following Ryan Holiday, who's another big philosopher. I don't know if you know him, but plays well with others. That's good. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So, Anne, how are we doing?
I'm well educated.
That is Nicole. That is our counterpart. And I don't know, Nicole, in case you're on a computer, you have to do this on a cell phone. That's my only thought of maybe why you can't get on with us. So we'll jump in and we'll keep moving. How's that for today?
Great.
Okay, awesome.
Good to me.
So thank you for joining us. I'm Ann Canastra. I'm a licensed professional mental health counselor and on the board of NAMI New York State. And I just wanted to say thank you so much. I do have short bios. I want everybody to introduce themselves, but I wanted to take a moment because I read about all of you pretty extensively over the past few days. And I just wrote little things that I just think are so important with our topic and what we're doing. Alicia, first of all, you're a mother, a wife, a philanthropist, activist, creator, and award-winning actress and producer. You graciously gave your time tonight with the comment, which I think you are my soul sister, because you said, I'm walking into this blind with a desire to help. And I just think the best kind of help on this earth comes from people with that kind of heart. And so I'm so grateful to you for just saying, like, I'm coming here blind, but I'm so willing to help. Like that is a very gracious statement.
Thank you. You know, all we have is like our bodies to show up with, right? I'm watching The Dropout right now, and on the wall it says, you know, there is no do. There is no try. There is just do, and that's a lot of my truth, and particularly around mental health. I'll say, when I share my truth about things and try and service, like for me, being of service to others helps my mental health. Like that's just the truth of it.
Absolutely.
It helps me not feel so alone, because a big piece of my mental unhealth is isolation.
Yeah. That's for most of us too. So I am giving you so much gratitude just for being here with an open mind, open heart to come at it. Jessie is a mother, wife, philanthropist, and hails from a long lineage of fashionable female entrepreneurs. It is with brainstorming with Jessie that I came up with this idea to have this series of talks Health Month, as her nonprofit Repurpose is donating proceeds to NAMI New York this month. And she will be a part of our fashion show in November, Off the Mask. So we're thrilled that Jessie is here and is passionate about women's mental health and women's issues. We wouldn't be here this evening without you. And so I come to the table also full of gratitude for you this evening.
Oh, well, thank you, Anne. That's so nice of you to say. I'm very honored to be part of this conversation. And I think that these Tuesday talks are great because it kind of takes the stigma away and out of the idea of mental health. I think that, or the, problems that everybody goes through. I think that mental health and well-being are so key in life. And I also met actually Alicia years ago when I sat on the board of Bent on Learning, which brings yoga and mindfulness into the underserved schools. And she was gracious enough to host one of our galas when I was sitting on the board, and both of us became, I think, very interested in one another and the energies that we both, I think, bring to the table, and as mothers with girls similar ages. So it's fun to reconnect with you, Alicia, after all these years, and still working with, giving back and giving to the resources where we can help. And I'm excited for this conversation tonight.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to take a minute and introduce Nicole. Nicole Miller is a mother, wife, also a philanthropist, educator, and coordinator of integrative health, specializing in working with perinatal anxiety and depression, chemical dependency, obesity, cancer, and trauma. She further serves as an expert in integrative health and integrative health practitioner for antepartum and postpartum patients. She's a creator and a helper, and she uses her hands and her heart to heal. She's an expert in trauma massage. I have taught with Nicole, and she has created some incredible programs for veterans as well as for women at Crouse Hospital. And she actually is a national speaker for massage therapists. So an educator.
Wow.
She's just a brilliant woman. And so I'm hoping we can figure out how to get her on here because she's going to bring to the table.
I hope so too. And regardless, I definitely want to book her for a trauma massage.
Yeah.
You know what? You should. I can tell you, she knows bodies. I went to see her once and she said, Ann, what's up with your shoulder? And I had rotator cuff surgery, but I didn't tell her. And she said, oh no, I can tell. Or maybe I was due for my rotator cuff surgery, but she knew. Like she just knew. And I was like, what's happening? And my husband has gone to see her and she is brilliant. So you definitely should. And she's in the woods.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So let me start with some facts and then we'll share some of our stories and experiences and discuss some of what we're here to talk about today. I want to first talk about a little bit of terminology. So perinatal is the 2-year time frame from conception to the baby's first birthday, right? Because we actually carry babies for about 10 months, even though the lie says 9. Antenatal or prenatal is during pregnancy. And then postpartum or postnatal is the first year following pregnancy. Okay, so there's some terms in here that when we talk about these things like antenatal, that's not something I hear every day, but in the literature, it's significant. So I want to throw it out there. I also think tonight we need to honor talking a little bit about infertility as we're talking about these topics, because this is something that is happening for millions and millions of people, still very stigmatized, right? I think it's coming to the forefront. But I wanted to share some facts about that as we get rolling. And maybe we have stories we want to share. I know I certainly have some stories with this area too. So infertility takes a pretty heavy toll on mental health. Couples experience significant anxiety and emotional distress, along with deep feelings of grief and loss. Shame, guilt, depression, isolation, loneliness are all feelings people who are going through infertility struggles experience. Many people who experience infertility share that what they're going through is the most upsetting experience of their entire lives so far. Right? We grow to think like, oh, I could have a family if I want to. And then it's kind of ripped away from us, right? That false belief that we're grown into having. Fertility drugs are harsh and can cause mental distress themselves. They're hormone treatments, and hormones can be toxic to us. Hormone therapy can have giant emotional impacts, from sleep disturbances to disruptions in sex drive, to hot flashes, to depressed mood, anxiety. And the list is really endless of the treatment, the side effects from some of the treatments that can come along with infertility. During pregnancy, as many as 1 in 5 women have mental health problems in their pregnancy. The rate's higher for women of color, another thing that we just don't talk about. And it's specific to the Black population more than other populations of color. Depression and anxiety are leading concerns. Discontinuing medications can also play a role in this in pregnancy. However, there's hope for many medications as science is quickly establishing safer meds for mamas and babies. So if a mama has been on a medication for a long time that's worked for them, like an antidepressant, antipsychotic med, they go off of them because they don't want side effects for the baby, right? Of course, we're all growing these little beings and we don't want side effects. But discontinuing them can cause major disruptions to our mental health, right? Maternal mental health conditions are caused by a combination of changes in biology, psychology, and environment. So there's 3 causes to these things. And then let's talk just a little bit about postpartum before we get into our stories. The baby blues are a normal period of transition, affecting up to 85% of new mothers in the first 2 to 3 weeks after the baby's born. Baby blues are not the same as postpartum. Baby blues are when my parents came over after I had my son 13 years ago, and as they pulled out of the driveway, I stood at my front door with this beautiful little baby who was sleeping, but I cried because I thought, who's going to hold him? Because I was just upset in that moment, right? Like that was the baby blues. That is not the same thing as postpartum depression, okay? Postpartum depression occurs when depression affects activities of daily living and symptoms, including hopelessness, helplessness, and worthlessness, lacking motivation, concentration, energy, loss of interest, worried, overwhelmed, being hypervigilant about the baby, extreme anxiety, having scary or intrusive thoughts, feeling on edge, being restless or panicked. So it's different. It's much more clinical than just the baby blues, okay? People with maternal mental health conditions may say that having a baby was a mistake. That's one of those kind of red flags that me as a clinician says, oh, maybe something else is going on here. Maybe they're not bonding with baby. They're afraid to be alone with the baby. They're exhausted, but they can't sleep even if the baby's sleeping. Or maybe that the baby would be better off without her. Suicide and overdose combined are the leading cause of death for women in the first year following pregnancy, with the highest incidence of suicide about 6 to 9 months postpartum. I think we think sometimes that postpartum depression is like, oh, right after a baby's born for a few months, people get depressed. But actually that first year is a really crucial time where a lot of people experience postpartum, and there's so many pieces to it. And so I think it's important to kind of expand our idea today. And finally, one really important thing, and I'll be interested to hear what you both have to say, 75% of women who experience maternal mental health symptoms go untreated, making the cost to be about $32,000 per mother-infant pair and adding up to over $14 billion in our country alone of untreated mental health conditions. Okay, so this is making people miss work. This is making us, miss friendships. This is making us go on different medications later. This is getting so it becomes a bigger clinical concern than it could have been if we had handled it sooner, right? So I know I've shared a lot. I like to throw out a lot of statistics in there because I think it gets us thinking. But I would love for you both. I don't know if Alicia, you want to maybe share a little bit of your story and what you bring to the table in talking about some of this.
Sure. It's interesting. I had postpartum depression. I had no idea I had postpartum depression. And it's important to me to talk about. And I didn't talk about it for a very long time because I was ashamed. And it's really important for me to talk about now so nobody feels alone. But I will share, and it's kind of fuzzy for me, like the when of it. And like, I think I have a 13-year-old now, and when she was about 6 months, not early on, like early on, I had my stuff together and I felt really good. And, she was a sleeper, and I had a lot of prep for, like, if I had trouble nursing, I had like a lactation consultant on hand ready, and I didn't need them. And if she had trouble sleeping, I had a sleep person on hand and ready. I did use that person once. And I did not have a therapist ready. And that's the one thing that it's like, have your team ready, have your friends ready, have your family ready, but also have your professionals ready. Have a doula ready. If, God willing, you can afford it. And see if you can't afford it, there are sliding scale availability for all of these things, but to have a lactation consultant, to have a doula, an afterbirth doula, to have a sleep person, and to have a therapist for you. Because when she was about 6 months, I started going through depression, and I had no idea I was depressed. I had no idea. And my husband could tell, but he didn't know what to do. He didn't want to be like, dude, you're depressed. Like, he knew that wasn't helpful. And he really didn't know how to help me. And the day that I sought help was, he was just like, babe, why don't you go for a walk? Why don't you go outside? And I will never forget this day, because I went for a walk, and I remember exactly the block I was on. Like, I remember everything about this moment. because I was walking and like just so sad. And I remember thinking, you know, I think they'd be better off without me. And I clocked the thought. Like a part of me heard the thought and was scared witless. Like, holy fuck, that, sorry, I don't know if cursing is okay. Like that, it scared me so much that thought just went through my head. Like, and it probably wasn't one thought, honestly. It was like, what should I, like, starting to think about, like, what does that look like to end my life? Like, how could I do that to, in a way that wouldn't set them too much, you know, like it was starting a series of thoughts, and I caught myself and went, oh, I need help. This is not okay. So that's my story. And thank God I caught myself and I did get help. And I'm here to have this conversation so no human feels alone when they have those thoughts. Those dark thoughts are so scary. And I hadn't really had them. I had them in my teen years, a couple different times where I was like, I don't know if I want to be on this planet anymore. But I had gotten a lot of therapy and a lot of help. And I got a lot of therapy before becoming a mom because I really wanted to like do the work and have the tools to be able to walk through it and not pattern what I was taught. You know, I was taught some not necessarily the healthiest patterns. And I really wanted to create new patterning and new boundaries with my family. But that shocked me. Like it really shocked me and scared me. And I'm glad it scared me because it got me the help I needed, which included a therapist, which included talking about it, not about that moment. Like I couldn't talk about that moment until actually 2 years ago when I did a movie about postpartum depression. But it got me talking to other moms about my feelings about worthlessness. You know, you mentioned the worthlessness. And that's the truth. I thought I was such a bad mother. I thought I was so bad at it that they would be better off without me. That's where that thought came from, was I felt like a failure as a mother. I was failing. I was so bad at it. So yeah, that's my happy story.
Yeah.
And happy because I'm still here, you know? Yeah.
I'm happy you're still here too. And I'm also really, I relate to you, and I relate to that as a mother and as a person. And yeah, this makes so much sense. And those things that we don't talk about or that we're not ready to talk about for years. Like, yeah, that's the hard stuff.
I want to hear your story, Jessie. I don't know your story.
Well, my story, I have 3 children. My oldest is similar in age as actually both of yours, because 13 going on 14. I have 3 daughters. And the first time that I got pregnant was before my oldest daughter. So I miscarried, and it was very, very traumatic for me. I think that, you know, your hormones early on, I mean, it was an earlier pregnancy, but the stage of the hormones are building and tripling and tripling and tripling. And then all of a sudden, like, there's a loss, and that loss hit me so hard. I mean, I think I cried for days. So that was my first kind of, I guess, real introduction to like hormones and what they play on your body and the emotional toll. So, and my first child was born in Milwaukee. I'm currently living in New York City, where both of my other two children were delivered. So I was there, she was very young when we moved here, but I had family there and a support system and a husband, and I felt like, I loved being pregnant. I was so excited to become a mom, very type A personality. I was prepared and ready. And then this baby came, and I think that it was really hard. It was just exhausting and emotionally wearing. And there was one night that she was up and she was sleeping, and I was so sleep deprived. And my husband, at that time, there really wasn't that much paternity leave. Like maybe he took off like 2 days, and then I was left. And yes, like my mother came, and my mother-in-law came, and I had people visiting in and out, and people were helping me. But we didn't have like night nurses or lactation consultants. Like that wasn't really common. And nor I really felt this obligation that I could do it. And she was crying, and she was really restless, and I got physically, like I was trying to calm her down, and I wasn't aggressive with the baby. I was like calm with her. But my husband came in, and he wanted to take her from me, and I got like crazy on him. Like my emotional stability and my levels were so sorry, I gotta charge my phone. But it was a real shock for me, and that pulling it together and getting into a routine and becoming kind of obsessive about the baby and sort of letting myself go in a way. I never had thoughts of like, I don't want to be here, but I can understand what you feel like. Nobody tells you that your whole life is like forever changed, and you're not the number one anymore in your life. There's this other human that depends on you. And I think that's such a big responsibility. And I think for a lot of people, that doesn't come very naturally. I mean, and so I think that story isn't told enough. It's not normalized enough. And for me, I ended up finding a woman, and I don't even remember because it was so long ago, that started to come to my home, and she started doing yoga with me, and like hatha yoga, very restorative, and meditation. And that really, really was able to help me kind of slowly reevaluate and then put things into perspective, and then have the conversation with my husband that like, I need my time too. And I think that's so important with, and I'm not a clinician, and I don't know the cures for postpartum depression, but for my own personal journey, having the ability to take back some of my ownership of my own life and not be so solely having this child solely dependent on me, or feeling like I nursed for a year, and like nobody told me how hard that was going to be, that I was like going to be literally basically a 2 every 2 to 3 to then 4 to then eventually it normalizes. But this baby was relying on me, and that was such a huge responsibility. It was almost overwhelming. But I think having these conversations are so important, and normalizing it, because it's something I didn't really experience it with the other two as greatly as I did with my first. And maybe it was because I knew what I was expecting. I don't know. Or maybe it was just different times in my life, and I had different support systems kind of there. But it was really challenging, really hard.
I so relate. It's funny because when someone talks about depression, I think about that, like that hopelessness and that worthlessness. Mm-hmm. But when you were just talking, like you reminded me of all those times of like deep feelings of like deep helplessness and just, mm-hmm. It feels like treading water, like, and you don't know how to swim. Like early motherhood, you're like, it's like you feel like you're being thrown in the water and you have no idea how to swim. And there were so many times when like they're up all night and they won't go to sleep, or they're sick, or they won't breastfeed or they won't eat no matter what, or whatever it is, like, or they're eating every hour. There's so many moments that take you to your breaking point.
Right. You're like, what's that smell? And it's
and
like
I think people have talked about it a little. What?
I said, it's like, you know, you'll like, I remember being like, what is that smell? And it was like me. It was like,
and you're like, when did I shower? What?
Laugh. It's not funny, but
no, it is.
The one thing that strikes me, and I brought this up last week, we kind of introed the bigger idea of the month and women and stigma and trauma and things like that last Tuesday, but you know, I'd shared something about this. I am a clinician. I've been practicing for over 17 years, and I absolutely adore being a therapist. But when I had my kids, I had Carter. He's almost 14. He'll be 14 in July, and I have the twins who are 11 and a half. And I had normal postpartum stuff with Carter. I only nursed for 6 weeks because, man, it was harder than anybody ever told me it was going to be. With my twins, I went in a little bit more prepared, and I'm like, I got this. I'm going to try this, you know, tandem feeding stuff. And I made it a lot longer with them. I made it about 6 months. For twins, I'm still saying that's an accomplishment. But I had those twins in October, late October, and one had health issues, one did not. And bonding was hard, especially with the one that had more health issues. And it went into the winter months. It was dark. It was lonely. During the holidays, nobody has time to visit you with new babies. Even if they want to love and squeeze on your babies, everybody's doing their own thing, right? Like they don't have time to nurture you like you hope they would, or even if they said they would, they just don't have time. And I was off work. My husband, just like yours, Jessie, didn't have the time off either, right? Because that wasn't a thing a decade ago. 1 decade ago, isn't that something? It's not that long ago. And it just wasn't. And I was sitting on my living room floor with 2 bouncy chairs, just waiting for one of the babies to need me to pick them up from their little chair. I was drinking about a pot of coffee a day, sometimes 2 if I really needed it, just sitting there waiting. And it was about 6 months, so probably like March-ish. And I remember my hair kind of falling out, and I was thinking like, maybe this is thyroid, right? Like, I'm a therapist. I would recognize something else. And so I went in and I talked to my OBGYN, and she did my blood work. She humored me like, yep, let's rule out all medical conditions. And she said, you know, your blood work came back pretty normal. Do you think this could be delayed postpartum depression? And I looked at her and I said, no way. I'm a therapist. No way. And she was like, okay, yep. And I still sit with that idea, and she was right. Of course she was right. And I couldn't see it in my own mirror because I was struggling.
Yeah.
And I
think that's so true. I think so much of our own personal struggles, we mask and we try not to, especially I suppose for you that's trained in it, or, you know, I'm around women all the time. Like my profession, I'm constant, and I'm in their most intimate settings. And I've dealt with so many clients recently that have had babies or having babies or getting back into their, and there is like you, when you're so close to it, sometimes you don't see, or when you're in it, you don't recognize it and realize it.
Yeah.
And I think much more normal than people. I mean, what did you say the statistics were of postpartum? How many women suffer from it? 1 in 4?
1 in 5 would suffer.
1 in 5.
We believe suffers from actual clinical postpartum depression. 20% of women.
Yeah, that's super high.
That's a lot. And I go the hormones. Of course, hormones are torture. I think hormones at any stage of our lives are torture, from fertility treatment to, you know, after you're done having babies and you go into, you know, the perimenopausal stuff. Like, hormones are torture for us. And I don't think we give that enough credence.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, I remember when I stopped nursing with each of my daughters, the hair that came out in the shower, just like
Yeah.
sheds. Like, why does nobody tell you that? Like, I feel like there was no conversation. Why does everybody not, like that your emotional bandwidth is going to be shortened because you're sleep deprived, and what sleep, like the importance of sleep. And, that's one of the biggest factors for mental health is getting adequate sleep. I mean, we're tortured, right? We are not, that is so important. Am I frozen or no? I feel like
No.
Alicia is freezing a
No.
little bit. No.
No.
Okay. Yes. And sleep deprivation to anybody, you see studies on it, and that's where people really lose their mind. Oh, you've joined.
Yay, Nicole's here. But yes, Jessie, you are right on with sleep. That is something clinically that I look for with everybody I see, and in my own house, wherever, like for my kids, I try to keep everybody really whatever we need to do. And there are treatments for sleep disorders, right? Not just medications too. There's cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. We call it CBTI. Like there's really good treatments to help people sleep. Sleep is so foundational. Our brains need to rest. And during these periods when we have these little babies or our bodies are adjusting and growing a baby, it is hard to sleep, right? Yeah. It is hard. And so, yes, you're right. Yeah. So Nicole, I would love if you are ready. I don't know if you've been hearing us and all the things that we've been talking about.
I have, in fact, I wanted to kind of support some of your points with some things that I brought up in some of my classes in the past. You talked about hormones. My husband is a biomechanical engineer and does a lot of statistical research. And I asked him one day, when you look at the hormones that affect pregnancy, if you were to measure them before pregnancy compared to blood volume, what would that look like? And what he recognized was that before pregnancy, or the hormones in your body are such a minute substance that they're equivalent to drops of water in an Olympic-sized pool. Would that Olympic pool be in your, however 10 liters of blood that you have? Drops of water, and that's how strong these chemicals are. And in pregnancy, they will increase by about half of their original volume. So they're very potent, and the slightest of change can create a significant response for somebody. So many women don't realize that it's out of their control. It's nothing that they did wrong. It's nothing that they, did personally. Just a matter that it's chemical sometimes for them. But there are some things they can do to help themselves. And as you were talking, sleep is so important. Many people don't give mothers enough chance to take care of themselves and to get sleep. I taught a class a few years ago, and I thought, interesting. I was working with the veteran population for years, and you and I taught the invisible service class, right? And here in this class, honoring veterans who are living with these invisible service wounds. Well, then I went to a perinatal conference, and I thought to myself, why don't we call them invisible birth wounds? Wounds, right? All these things that women go through before birth, whether childhood trauma or an ACE event, up until their time that they deliver, a lot of them live with these wounds, and they are invisible. But women are expected just to take it, right? And just to deal and to move on. So I started to teach about that topic to say, if we can give veterans the respect of invisible service wounds, I think we should start giving women the respect of invisible birth wounds and give them.
I love that you said that. And I want to like really touch on something that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about ever, which is the emotional stuff that comes up when you become a mother, and the layers of sort of historical and sometimes hysterical just stuff that comes up. And I will say, like, as I mentioned earlier, I did a lot of therapy before becoming a mother to prepare because I wanted to have joy in my life, but also to prepare to be a mother. Because, you know, let's just say because, and I thought I had like dealt with all my stuff. And then this small human brought up so many memories and so much just stuff, like stuff that was really uncomfortable about what is parenting, what does work and what doesn't work about parenting. And also, as I mentioned, those feelings of like not enough and shame, like so much shame that it feels in that FOMO way, like everybody's doing it perfectly except me. Everyone got this, or got it more quickly than me or whatever. And I will also share, you know, I felt really shamed for having one child. So many people have said to me, like, oh, just the one. And there have been celebrities who will remain nameless who have said in the press that like having one child is like, just, you don't really know what being a mother is until you have more than one. And
I'm so glad you said that, Alicia, because I have a neighbor who has a daughter who's at college now doing brilliant things, but they have one girl. She was our nanny for a couple of years, actually. And she said to me, she said, Ann, people say to me all the time, and a parent in particular in our school district said, I just don't know why you would only have one. And she said to me, well, Ann, I only had one because I could only have one. Like that's all she could have, and she couldn't have more. And it's painful. It's really painful when people say things like that, whether or not you can only have one or whether or not it's your choice to have one. Those things don't feel good.
No, I mean, people say the stupidest things, I feel like. I mean, they really do. Like, who is to judge? You know, I mean, where we're at right now with our country, like, is a whole nother conversation, right? Which I'll stay out of that tonight. But, like, you know, we're talking about, that's horrible. I mean, to be honest with you, it's nobody's business, really, right? I remember having my first daughter and coming back to work, and I was working at my family's business, and one of our regular customers was like, oh, wow, you had a girl. You still look good, because usually girls take away your beauty. And it was just like, wow.
People say the dumbest things. And I will share, for me, I didn't have a second in the first 5 years because I knew emotionally I couldn't handle it. Having had that suicide scare, let's call it what it was, I knew I wasn't going to bring another human into the world until I felt really competent and comfortable as a parent and as a human. And that didn't really happen until she was 5. It was until she was like 5 that I felt like, okay, I'm solid. And then we did try again, and, you know, that wasn't in the cards for us. And I didn't do IVF either time because I am hormonally sensitive, and every time, like, just going on the pill brought me to my knees, depression-wise. So I knew that wasn't an option for me. So IVF wasn't an option for my psychological health. And I knew, again, having had that scare, that I couldn't risk going on IVF with a child because I couldn't risk my mental health and what that would do to me as a mother. You know, I didn't want to do that to myself or my child. And the other like shame point that I feel like nobody really talks about, and I really want to talk about it here because that's why we're here, is jealousy within the household. You know, I actually, one of the really healing things I did early on was I did a show called, oh my goodness, I can't remember. It's like a spoken word thing, like The Moth, and it's all stories about motherhood. I think it's called Listen to Your Mother. And it was so healing for me because I did it with another woman, and we talked about, and we didn't talk about it. We called it The Affair, and we both spoke about our husbands falling in love with another woman. And the end of the sort of spoken word piece, the essay, was you find out, like, we're talking about our daughters. And there's something that happens in a marriage that nobody talks about, where in those first few years, like, my husband fell madly in love with another woman in my house. I had to love the fact that he was in love with her. And sometimes I did, but sometimes I didn't. Sometimes it was really painful that I had to share this human. Just like sometimes it was really painful that I had to share her with him. Like, the triangulation is something that nobody talks about. And
Good point.
It's really, I had so much shame about it. And so I really try and talk about it now so that other people don't feel alone in that.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. And I think, you know, this topic certainly brings up a lot for all of us. Like, I talk to families every day. A big part of my clinical work at the VA hospital is working with families. And I see this all the time. Kids come into a marriage, you know, because they want them or don't want them or whatever, but they come into a marriage, and after a while the kids leave and people look at each other and they're strangers again because the kids come in between, you know, like the parents love on the kids and they drift apart. I see that all the time. And I really work on that with families, of balancing and rebalancing, and marriages are work in that. Like, people always say marriages take work. And I like to say, well, marriages take balance, and it's never truly 50-50. As much as we want to say they're 50-50, that's the biggest lie we've ever been sold. Marriages are constantly rebalancing and rebalancing and rebalancing. It's rarely ever 50-50 because it takes this work. So when this little girl comes in a marriage, or my twins came in on top of my other son, you know, like, a little more attention gets pulled away from me. A little more nurturing gets pulled away from me, right? And I'm sure from me to them too. So a little more attention gets away from my husband too. And so how are we rebalancing, and how are we doing this? And Alicia, I'm really grateful because you're right. People don't talk about that. And I also love it. You know, you talked a minute ago too about the movie you made about postpartum and how you're able to channel your history and some of your healing into the characters that you're playing. And I really adore that.
I mean, like, that's the joy of being an artist. I think it's the same thing that we talked about when we started this conversation of the way we get out of the isolation is to be of service to another human being. And that's, I feel outrageously lucky, like you all are, you know, that's my life's work, you know, that as a therapist, as two therapists here and a massage therapist, and Jessie, you've made it your life's work in your work. Like, your work is so, like, deeply integrated and baked into your mission is service. And I think it does, for me, that feeling of not being alone is the biggest gift. And it's the biggest gift you can give, and it's the biggest gift that you can get.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Nicole, I'm going to ask somebody to give me a gift of a massage from you.
I'm glad to very glad to hear that. Massage is a wonderful method for which to connect with people. And so we provide, I work at Crouse Health, and I visit with some of the moms who are in the antepartum unit. So they're high risk and they're in a very stressful circumstance. And because of COVID regulations, visitation's limited now. So some of them are a little lonely. And so we're there to kind of offer them some comforting touch and some socialization in a positive way, and then with hopes to start or plant that seed about self-care afterwards. I had a conversation today with 2 patients, and they were really surprised at how they felt, and they were actually postpartum patients, and they were reluctant to allow me to have 8 minutes to give them a massage in their room because their baby was on the floor. And so I need 8 minutes. Let me just give me 8. And so they did. And they just loved it. And I went back to check on one later, and she said, my shoulders are so relaxed. I feel so much more comfortable. And I said, it's okay to feel that way. It's okay. It's okay to let yourself feel good. And it's good for you to nurture yourself so that you can be a good caregiver. And so massage is great. And I encourage everybody to follow up on it.
Yeah, I think self-care is so important. And the idea that if everybody in the world can kind of become actualized in their own self, right? And their own worth and what they can bring to the table, because we all can bring something, and be proud of the work that we do. I'm curious though, to the 2 therapists in this little conversation, what are key takeaways? Like, what are people that are either suffering from postpartum or people that are witnessing their spouses or loved ones suffering from it? What are action steps for them to take to get the help that they need? I mean, Alicia, obviously you mentioned you had access to a therapist. Not everybody has access. Like, what are key things and signs that I guess that we should be encouraging people to do, or ourselves actually do, if we're going through it?
I love that you asked that, and I really want to hear, but I just also need to say out loud to anyone listening, like, my husband was afraid to say anything. Like, he was afraid of like making it work. So I really thank you for asking that question.
Yeah. So one of the things that I share with people is that at a few months after my twins were born, my husband identified it in me one night. He came home from work and he just placed his hands on my arms and said, "I'm worried about you." And I think some of you, and you were reflecting on your story earlier in the conversation. It's often the people around the person who witnesses the decline, the anxiety or depression, and they are worried to say something. We try in childbirth to start to prepare those partners for that opportunity, or that moment that they can just very candidly identify what they're observing, what they're feeling, what they're seeing with their partner. One of the other things we like to do is to suggest to people, if you, prior to your pregnancy, we're taking medicine for anxiety or depression, please don't just stop it because you're pregnant. So many moms are worried that they're going to take a pharmaceutical and it might have a safety impact on their baby. And what we try to encourage them to do is, before you make any changes, consult with your obstetrician and have them consult with a psychiatric specialist so that they can identify, is there safe, or what's worse? Is it not taking the medicine, or the risk of their mental health condition becoming activated or increased? So please make any changes, consult first, and just know that many of the medicines that are available today for moms during pregnancy and afterwards while breastfeeding are safe for mom and baby. So it's one of the most important things is to have a healthy, happy mom as best as we can. And the other thing that is available for services in our area, there is a perinatal family program. I know our hospital, Crouse Health, has it. I'm sure that St. Joe's does, and I would assume that Upstate does as well. Typically with these family support programs, they do have on-call services for people. And it doesn't matter how long ago you birthed your baby. If it had been months and you're struggling, you can call the hospital and ask them for support, and they will direct you into the right department to get you support. Although the typical postpartum period or perinatal period is 1 year or 2 years, many providers will say it can last for years beyond that. So, so please, if you are experiencing a challenge, check with your OB first, or check with your hospital first to see if they have perinatal support services.
And I actually have a question for you guys. You know, here we are on Instagram, and I've never thought of social media as a place I go for mental health. That's just me. And I've read a lot of articles about how many incredible therapy modalities and tools there are on Instagram sites, on TikTok, on how do you guys feel about that? And how would someone seek that out?
I'll take this one. How about that? I am a fan of social media now. I think the pandemic has really changed our field. I had a therapist friend say to me in 2015, I had just started doing some online therapy with a pretty well-known platform. They were on the Today Show, whatever. And I was like, oh, kind of neat. I'm going to try this. I had one of my colleagues say, that will never work. You can't do therapy on the computer. And so I really got shy with it and stopped sharing it with my therapist friends because I was like, oh, maybe this isn't okay, but I kept doing it. And so then all of a sudden you started seeing certificates and teletherapy pop up and different things getting popular. Then the pandemic hit. All of a sudden, all of us were teletherapists overnight, right? March 13th, I think we all became teletherapists in 2020. And so I kind of laughed because I'd been doing it for 5 years at that point. And now I use social media. I have a Facebook. I have an Instagram. My kids are on those. My son follows my stuff, you know, and his friends, his 13-year-old buddies follow my stuff. And it's really kind of cool. I'm a fan of it. Now, I don't buy into everything. There are certain very well-known therapists out in the world I don't like. I don't like some of their advice. I don't, you know, like I think everybody needs to match with a therapist that fits them. Right? Like there's no advice that is
so that's hard in itself, right? I mean, that's right. Something that you, like, as you mentioned, there's so much out there. How much is legitimate versus you could have like a real clean looking website with tons of followers and you could be a deep fake, you know, like, I don't know. So I think you have to be cautious, right?
You do. Just like any doctor you see though, right? And it's okay to fire your people. And I say this with maternal mental health people too. I went through this last year. I went to my OBGYN and I started talking about how things were a little different in my 40s. I am not having kids anymore. I was feeling a little more hormonal at different times in a different way, a little moodier. And I didn't like the reception I got. And I talked to one of my other doctors and I said, I think I need to fire my OBGYN. And I felt guilty. Like, oh my God, she had my babies. She helped me through all this stuff for a decade and a half. It's okay to fire clinicians. It's okay to fire a therapist who doesn't work for you and isn't matching. It's okay to fire your OBGYN and find someone who gets the perimenopause stuff and who's going to be there for you, right? It's okay to do these things.
I love that you said that. And I actually have to jump right at 8 o'clock because I have another meeting.
Yes.
But I want to end and say goodbye on, I love that you said fire your people, because the other thing that I really want everyone to leave with is fire the mean voices in your head. That's, you know, one of the biggest things I've learned over COVID times, which I call the meditation retreat that none of us signed up for, is I did start to really meditate more, and I became much more aware of all the voices in my head and how much they lied to me. And just because a voice in my head says it doesn't mean it's true. I obviously learned that 13 years ago when the voice said, maybe you should die now. But there's a lot of voices on a daily basis that are not worth listening to. And I've taken to naming some of them. One is called well, anyway, we don't have time for it all. Maybe a second thing, but don't fire the voices in your head too. And I'm so grateful to you all. So grateful for this conversation. So grateful to everyone who joined.
You too. And we have to connect with New York State, Alicia. You know, we're so grateful, and we'd love to further this conversation with you at, you know, some other point. Thank you for joining us for our first series of talking about women's mental health this month.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Amber.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Great night.